Hi Prateek.
Hello.
Yeah. So friends, my name is Ankit and I am here with my batchmate from IIT Delhi days, Prateek. Uh, we were together in during our MBA days, and the topic that we have decided today to discuss is about Indian agriculture. Um so Prateek, if you could dwell upon the topic a little bit.
So we know that agriculture is a hot topic today. We are talking about three bills, or two of them are now not yet act, but bills which have been discussed by Parliament today and passed by two houses of the Parliament today. Of course, after President action, they will become acts. Uh, so I have background with the kind of farming. I come from a place which is very rich in farming, south of Haryana. My father is a kind of trader or commission agent or adatiyas. They have been like bearing burnt of all of those discussions on these bills right now. So I understand farming as an industry, the commission agents like adatiyas as a business slightly because I have been growing up. All I have watched is that kind of business. So that got me interested into like what difficulties Indian farmers face, or basically why Indian agriculture is not that developed or does not grow at the scale that we want it to grow. Uh, so based on those discussions, I have had some thoughts and like the key thing, but we can chat about those kind of things that I want to chat like in detail later. But basically, what I want to focus in that is that Indian farmers produce huge amount of low quality products, and low quality by means not the quality of grain, but in terms of value chain addition. So rice, wheat, sugarcane, the staple diets that we produce, we have an oversupply and cut of that. While we haven't, our farmers and we as a nation haven't invested a lot in farming and producing high quality products like cash crops, like fruits, vegetables, high nutritious food, and things like that. So we can chat about that later as we go along.
So Prateek, how would you define low quality food? You use the term low quality, and I understand that you meant staple kind of food items like wheat, rice, etc., sugar cane, sugar, etc. So how would you just explain what is cash crop and what is low quality food?
So by low quality, and I don't think low quality is the right word, but I used it because I didn't have a better word. Basically, it means like low nutritious products which have high environmental impact. So sugarcane and rice are good examples in terms of having very high environmental impact. Our water table is draining like as an alarming pace because we'll I don't know if we should call it waste, but we use a lot of water for producing these two crops. And the nutritious value of these three crops is not that high. Of course, I understand that they are basically staple diets for us. People will die of hunger if we don't produce enough of them. But actually, we are producing much more than enough of them. Like every year, hundreds of thousands of ton of rice and wheat gets wasted in India. Even even after like government distributes free of charge to kind of all the poor families under right to food security act. And sugarcane, I have special kind of buff to that. I consider sugar basically as a kind of slow poison. Of course it tastes good, but our sugar consumption is highest in the world, and that's why we are probably diabetic capital in the world as well. So we can chat more about it, but there's I count them as low quality because of kind of their environmental impact and low nutritious value they provide in when produced in like more than required amount.
So what do you think are the reasons that contribute to this, loop-sided production where such kind of products are produced more? Do you think it's because of food habits? Means, in economics we say that it's supply side and demand side. So do you think it's because of supply side that people want to eat that kind of food more? Or is it because of government policies? So I remember I was watching this documentary on Netflix which talked about uh, over there government makes a policy that how much protein, how much carbohydrate, how much fat should be there in a should be there in the diet, and then they do the reverse engineering and then they decide how much you produce they should do. I believe such kind of a study has not there been in India. Indian government has not worked upon what kind of nutrients should be there in the diet, etc. It's other way around in India that we first decided that we should produce this much wheat and then this much wheat or this much rice, and then people started eating those because government was subsidizing them. So, what are your views on
So
this?
yeah, so first thing, you said a very right point about kind of deciding nutrition's value and then saying, hey, this is what we need in production, and then trying to find that right balance. Of course, it is difficult in highly fragmented marketplace like Indian farming is, because how do you ensure that we produce only this much and not extra? But let's park that aside. That kind of study doesn't exist in India, and only thing that we measure in terms of nutrition value is calories. We say we need a diet of 2100 calories per person, and age group wise that's different for different age groups, but we don't say how much protein in additional we need, how much of fiber in addition we need, which, and these two things are very low producing production in kind of wheat and rice. Now, keeping that aside, coming to your larger question, what are the problems and why this kind of situation exists? I think, and I have read through these things like a lot of content. I think this region is historical. In 1960s, maybe somewhat in 70s as well, we were shortage of food. Our people were dying from hunger. We didn't have enough grain in our food. So what do you do in that case? Like calorie, proteins and fats and kind of fiber is important, but they are of no value if you don't have enough calories in your body. So our government highly incentivized producing wheat and rice. We picked up these two grains and we incentivized production of these. And over time, farmers get used to those things. So it comes very naturally. It's very easy to produce. Government subsidize a lot of things like rice. They provide MSP, which is far above market. So these crops are highly, not highly, I should not say highly because nothing is remunerative in farming, but slightly more remunerative as compared to other crops, and they don't want to take risk because they know how to do it. So they continue doing it. In addition to that, I think like, and it's very difficult to expect low end small farmer to change from producing wheat every year, producing paddy every year to get to something. So I think these are the factors which causes this factor to evolve. And then of course, because supply chain is not there, that's why there is high risk in moving on from rice to, let's say, bamboo, because we don't know what to do with that bamboo. There is no ecosystem, there is no demand for bamboo because there is no production from bamboo. So it's a kind of this economic cycle that develops over time, and we need to break this and to kind of, and everything will have to happen simultaneously. We cannot wait for one thing to happen to get the other pieces of this wheel moving.
But Pratik, tell me one thing: how how practical is it to implement such kind of drastic changes in Indian ecosystem, where Indian farmers suffers from very small land holding issues? So we know very well that there is a layer of farmers who have got a substantial land holdings, but almost 80-90% of the farmers have very small holdings. So I don't know how true it is, but I was watching a video of a farming activist who claimed that 85% of Indian farmers have 5,000 per month kind of monthly income. So if you want to make any change in the way you conduct your business, I'm calling it a business for the purpose of because that way we can understand it better in monetary terms. So if I am a farmer, I have a very small land holding, I am more or less hand to mouth. I don't have any working capital. For working capital, I am dependent on local RT. So how practical do you think it is for me, who forms around 80-90% of the producer, to implement such kind of changes, even mentally, not only
It,
economically, even mentally, until unless there is some nudge from the government. So correct me if I'm wrong, you can tell me better, but right now the only intervention that government provides, or only input that government provides to our farmer, is cheap urea. I don't know how.
I I will disagree with that. Like,
Okay.
it's my pet peeve, and I keep on talking about it, keep on thinking about it. I haven't written anything or kind of talked about it explicitly, but farming is most subsidized, most kind of basically a loophole or a resource black hole in Indian economy. So
Probably I
when
need to paraphrase over there. Probably I need to paraphrase over here.
slight bit of but let's get to this topic 1 minute before he comes back. Are you there?
Yeah, I am here. There seems to be some internet issue. Just a second.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think I need to paraphrase my point over here. I'm not going on the monetary part. So when it comes to monetary part, subsidies or anything, it's one of the inputs. My point is when you want me to produce anything, there are certain inputs that goes into it. Technology being one of them. Labor, land, all these are also there. So my point is Indian government, apart from giving cheap urea, cheap seed, subsidized MSP, and all those things, apart from that, is there any intervention by government to change farming patterns in India, farming practices in India, or to introduce technology as so if there are 10, let's say 10 small farmers, is there any government nudge them to form a cooperative and then have a kind of cash crop kind of thing, you grow flowers or anything? So that's my question.
I don't think about cooperative farming. Government does that, but government provides a lot of incentives to evolve farming practices. So there is a lot of grants that go into kind of new kind of irrigation practices. There are a lot of incentives that go for creating greenhouses. There are a lot of incentives that go along to create farm ponds. And they are sometimes like interest subsidized loans. They are a lot of times pure grants. So government is providing a lot of these things. It's just that they are not reaching bottom level, and probably magnitude is so small for every farmer to utilize it, and most of the farmers don't even know about it, and they don't even want to try it, and they don't want to go through the Indian bureaucracy to get to it. That is another aspect. And it also plays into like education of farmers is not that great as well, in the sense they don't understand details very highly, like how does these things work. And I feel like the farmer politics lobby is something which is to blame for it as well. Can you imagine that they kind of all farmer bodies, all Kisan unions, everybody, like any politics of farmers, will go on and oppose any genetically modified kind of seeds in India, right? They will never stop 1 second before trying to oppose them, without understanding science of it, without understanding how does it grow, how does it help farmers. While India imports so much of imported GMO stuff all over the country, right? We know, like, I think there is a golden rice which gets imported in India. While we are rice plus surplus, we import some quantity of rice in terms of golden rice, which is a GMO. I might be wrong, but there are a couple of more, like pineapple, also genetically modified. Cotton, we import a lot genetically modified cotton, but our farmers are kept away from these high-tech practices because of politics of it.
I think genetically modified is altogether different aspect. I was listening to one video. This is one point where I differ from you. I don't support blanket kind of GM introduction. So the activist was telling.
Sorry, I am also not saying that we should kind of get everything genetically modified, anything. It have to be tested in Indian condition, but we are not even allowing tests. That's my problem.
No, that's okay. So the point that I was trying to make, that I was listening to this video by one of the farming activists, and he told that a brinjal has been introduced, which has this property that when insect bites it, insect will die. So that's a genetical modification that has been brought into it. So the point that he was trying to make is, if insect dies by biting that brinjal, what effect will it have on my body when I consume it wholly?
So it is very bogus argument. First, insects don't die of any of genetically modified stuff. It's that
No. You missed my point. You missed my point. The point that he was trying to make, that a particular brinjal.
I understand. I am trying to explain the science behind GMO stuff.
Property.
Yeah, I am trying to explain the science behind GMO stuff. Have you ever seen any of insects, etc., on any kind of chili plant or turmeric plant or uh, any of the masala plants we use? Like it may be pepper, it may be even coriander or pudina. I mean, have you ever seen any kind of disease or any insect on them?
No, I don't think so.
And do you die by consuming them?
No, so that can be because of their smell or other things.
Sorry, what?
That may be because they have certain, pungent smell which distract the insect or those things.
Exactly, exactly. That's what genetically modified brinjal also uses as a property. We modify the genes. We basically get somewhat new bacterial genes or viral genes, whatever that may be, in brinjal, to so that it become unattractive to that insect, and that's why those insects don't destroy the farm.
I
And we, of course, it's entirely possible. Like there are enough disease, like things go wrong all the time in all sort of pharmaceutical experiments. But at least conduct experiments, like allow testing, and it is a kind of, and all the genetically modified things are not just because to repel insects. They are there to kind of lower the water consumption. They are there to increase production. They are make them like in resistant to some sort of chemicals which can be kind of used to destroy weeds in the farm, etc. So there are different kind of GMO stuff, but we are not even allowing testing. But I think we are digressing from topic. Let's come back to our original topic.
have another question for you. So until now we have, taken a review it from the side of government and farmer. Now let's come to consumer part. So as you very well said that we were very short on food supply to cater to our large population, and that's why we introduced staple foods like wheat, cereal aggressively. Okay, fine. So that was taken care of at that point of time. But it comes to the level of affordability. Do you think the level of affordability is there to afford more fruits and vegetables in the diet as opposed to having cereals like wheat and rice? Do you think that kind of demand is there to nudge that kind of supply?
I think there is. So fruit and vegetable have its own class altogether, like because a lot of production gets wasted. Even quality of products is not that good. But we can like create demand based on that. When availability is right now, our fruit juice costs like 50 rupees a glass, right? Every fruit juice, maybe orange or something, like maybe 30, maybe 50. In some cities it will be 50, in some villages it will be 30. But I was in USA till last year. I know juices are much cheaper over there because cost of production is much cheaper because raw material is much cheaper. So once you kind of grow them in scale, you reduce the cost of those, you improve yields, then like cost of production goes down and kind of price of those things goes down. And then they are become more democratized. I don't think like 80% of India consumes any fruit other than banana. So we need to get it in their hands for them to consume it, to be kind of to live nutritious. And like my whole point was not just about fruits and vegetables. I was also thinking about like why don't we grow a lot more of bajra, lot more of jowar. They are highly kind of nutritious food, of course, in some segments, but like certain fraction of your diet, if and they have been part of our traditional diet historically, right? So if we consume like 100 kg of rice in a year, then why can't we consume like 10 kg of bajra every kind of in a year as well? Why can't we consume 10 kg of jowar as well? It kind of makes sure that we get a more balanced diet, but we don't even have production for that.
That's a good point. I think it sort of forces me to think about another point. So wheat is more of an American and Russian cereal which was introduced into India by Green Revolution. While before that, the contribution of Indian cereals like jowar, bajra was more in Indian diets. But all of a sudden, because we started importing wheat, and America and Russia helped us in our Green Revolution, so the contribution of wheat to our diet became exponentially high. So that is
Yep.
that I think is a very good point. Another point, I had a very limited exposure to biology and farming, etc. But I distinctly remember that we were told that if you have different kind of crops in one cycle in 1 year, that also increases the fertility of soil. So one example was
Yep,
of pulses. So if you
yep.
have pulses in between your staple crops, it increases because it facilitate
Nitrogen fixation.
yes, yes. So that and ironically, we are supposed to be a vegetarian country, and in a vegetarian country, the supply of protein is more by pulses as compared to Western countries or other nations where supply of protein is by meat or non-vegetarian. And ironically, we are importer of pulses. We have
Yep.
such a huge ecosystem of farming. We are such a huge consumer of pulses, and then we are importing pulses. Isn't that very
Yep.
ironic thing?
Yeah, friend, and thank God that our pulses production have improved over last 5 7 years a lot by government incentives, etc. But that's a valid point. Like earlier, I distinctively remember 20 years ago in my village there is a small mandi. As I told you, my father was is a adatiya, so we used to see that. I used to see kind of equal quantity of so there is a rabi crop and there is a kharif crop. In one season we get a lot of mustard and wheat, and in other season we used to get a lot of kind of guar, bajra, chana, etc., jo, etc. as well. And now I see only like wheat and mustard. I don't see anything. Sometimes maybe guar and bajra, but that's it. There is no like chana in there, gram. There is no joe in there. And earlier it used to be at least like 10-20% of overall production that comes to our mandi in a season. Now it's almost 0%. So how do we blame it?
What were the reasons?
Because of kind of government artificially inflating through MSP prices of wheat and people getting used to cheaper rice, cheaper beans, seeds, etc., etc. That's what I feel. But I frankly don't know like why it happened. But it would be good to study like production of gram, production of jowar, bajra, etc. in India and I think consumer behavior have also changed. I saw like bajra comes cheaper than wheat, so I used to see a lot of bajra consumption in poor income families in India earlier, in my area at least. But now because government provides subsidized wheat, they have all moved to wheat, which is actually not as healthy as bajra, especially in kind of season of winter. So I think these are dynamics, wrong policies implemented. That's what forces or moved farmers in. Uh, it may be carrot, it may be stick, but moved farmers from kind of bajra uh, farming to wheat farming.
Coming back to the consumer part only, so I was so my this point again comes from the same documentary that I watched on Netflix, which is called Forks Over Knives. It
Mm-hmm.
talks about consuming more of vegetarian food as compared to non-vegetarian food. So they showed that as economy grew, the consumption of meat also grew
Mm-hmm.
as a source of protein because government studies focus more on protein, and they proved that focus on protein was much more than that is required, minimal amount is required. But that was for America. So my point is for India. So
Mm-hmm.
have you come across, so I remember I tried talking to my elders in the family to see if there has been some very substantial changes in the dietary patterns. How do you think the consumer consumption has varied over last 100 years or 70 years, which had implications for Indian farming produce allocation?
I don't know if I'm right the person to answer this question because I haven't studied it. I'm not a historian, but purely from opinion and subjective perspective, I would like to call out few things. First, our population have grown a lot in last 70 years, 50, 70 years, right? We are probably like 3x or 5x, maybe 3, 4x our population in last 70 years. That puts a huge, huge strain on all the resources that we have. And I guess that might be the reason as well. That's why we have changed our dietary preferences. But I definitely agree that now wheat and rice are a much bigger part of our diet than it used to be, like at least like 60, 70, 80 years back. We have reduced the kind of original and our own grains like bajra, ragi, cho, etc. a lot in our diet. That's for sure. I am sure we are consuming more pulses now because availability is more, etc. But I can't say anything about like how our meat consumption, fruits, vegetable consumption have evolved. Sorry, just one more thing. I definitely sure that our fruit and vegetable consumption have increased because of availability and variety, especially for people like us who are belong to middle class. Probably not so for like people who are not so fortunate as we are. But I can't say anything more than that.
Okay, so I think today we, discussed more about why we have more, why the production of agriculture produce in India is more towards certain products, chiefly wheat and rice. If we summarize the reasons, I think one and foremost is historical reason that government when was facing the issues of famine and uh, of lesser supply, so they introduced rice and cereal aggressively, and that policy has continued for last 40-50 years. There has not been any change in those policies in spite of rapid changes in economically and socially. So that is one reason. Second reason is the resistance on part of Indian farmer to change his practices, which may be due to inhibitions as well and due to some very valid economic reasons as well. And third reason is also somewhat from the demand side, that there is more consumption of wheat and cereal, which initially was because of government oversupply, but now because of MSP, the supply is more in the system, so people are eating more of it. And we need to have more focus on growth of other agricultural produce, which will also diversify the nutrient supply to our diets. So that reminds me of a quote that more colorful your diet is, your food is, your platter is, more nutrient it will have. So
Yeah.
this I think was our discussion. Anything more that you want to add in the summary part?
Yeah, just one more part, like lack of research. I wanted to cover this topic, but it didn't came into anything. Lack of research or innovation in Indian farming. Our government spends so much in kind of overall agriculture as a kind of industry, as we call it, right? But practically, like no Indian farmer having.
I think now that we are
Sorry.
starting, so we can, make it very very small point. Probably we can cover it in next video.
Yeah, makes sense. But yeah, lack of innovation and research is an important point. We haven't had new breeds in Indian kind of cereals like bajra, ragi, etc. I don't think we have improved even yields as we have improved in wheat, which is mostly imported from USA or kind of Russian technology.
Great. So I'll summarize again. The one point is MSP focus on certain foods. Second is historical reasons of green revolution where wheat and rice were aggressively promoted. Third reason is resistance on part of Indian farmer. Inhibition is also there. And then also his inability because of his smaller working capital, his smaller holdings, etc. And certainly the final point, as you said, lack of innovation on part of government and farmer both. So these are
Yep.
some of the points that we discussed today. Probably in next discussion, we can dwell upon how to, how cash crops can be promoted more, how that can contribute to dietary supplements of Indian consumers, how it can increase the quality of diet that we consume, and how it can help in increasing incomes of our farmers as well. Fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to add?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah. So thanks, Pratik. Thanks for such a informative and thought-provoking discussion. Because it was our first discussion, so there are bound to be some mistakes on our part. It may not be that much smooth. So let's hope that we will improve in by every video. So that's it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And thanks to our viewers as well. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.